and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. My name is Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the NFL Divisional Round playoff games while also making our predictions for the NFC and AFC Championship games coming next weekend. I'm by no means professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. The first game this weekend saw the Cincinnati Bengals travel to Nashville to take on the number 1 seed Tennessee Titans. The Bengals ended up leaving with a 19-16 victory after rookie kicker Evan McPherson kicked a game-winning field goal as time ran out in regulation. Bengal quarterback Joe Burrow threw 28 for 37 for 348 yards and an interception, while running back Joe Mixon ran the ball 14 times for 54 yards and a touchdown, while also catching 6 passes for 51 yards. Receivers Jamar Chase and T. Higgins also put up really big games today, as Jamar Chase had 5 catches for 109 yards and T. Higgins had 7 catches for 96 yards. On the other side of the ball, Ryan Tannehill was 15 for 24 for 220 yards, a touchdown, and 3 very crucial interceptions. Their leading rusher was Deontay Foreman, who had 4 carries for 66 yards, and this game saw the return of Derrick Henry, who had missed the last 9 games with a foot injury. Henry came into the game and rushed 20 times for 62 yards and 1 touchdown. The Titans' leading receiver was A.J. Brown, who had 5 receptions for 142 yards and 1 touchdown. Julio Jones also pitched in 6 catches for 62 yards. No other receiver on the Titans team had more than 3 catches for 13 yards. The story of the game, though, was the Tennessee Titans' defense. The Tennessee Titans' defense set a franchise playoff game record with 9 sacks. And I think that number is very important for the Bengals more so than it is the Titans. I think that just shows that the Bengals need to improve on their offensive line. You can't allow that many sacks in a game and expect to win every time. I know they did win this past weekend, but when you're playing a higher-powered offense that can actually put up more points in a game while their defense is getting that many sacks, there needs to be improvement. So if I'm the Bengals this offseason, I'm offering a huge contract to either Brandon Sheriff or Teron Armstead to come in and fix that offensive line. Obviously, they're only 1 or 2 guys, so they can't entirely fix an offensive line, but having an all-pro or a Pro Bowl left tackle or left guard coming into the team would be massive. A couple notes I have on this game from the Tennessee Titans side: they need to re-sign Harold Landry. He had 4 tackles and a sack and a half this game. He was really productive all season, and I think to have that much of an impact in a playoff game, he needs to be re-signed. They don't want to lose him. And along with Harold Landry, I think when they can, they need to offer a massive extension to Jeffrey Simmons. He was a game wrecker all year, and then in the divisional round game, he just came out and had 7 tackles and 3 sacks. That's huge, and it shows promise for a young player to have that big of an impact, despite having it be a losing effort. But for a young player to have that big of an impact in a playoff game, it just bodes well for the future. And A.J. Brown is a monster. It seemed like every time I was looking at the game, he was catching a ball and taking it 40 yards down the field, or he was taking most of the defense with him to take the attention away from everyone else. I think he's going to be scary. I know this isn't his first year, his second year, but I have a lot of hope for him. He's going to be a really good receiver, a top receiver in the league for years to come. And then a couple notes for the Bengals side. They are now going to their first AFC Championship game since 1988, and no one really expected them to even get this far this year. So they really have nothing to lose going into Arrowhead next weekend. So I think they're going to play with their heart on the line. They're going out, they're going to try to spoil Kansas City's party while also getting a Super Bowl berth, which would be huge. And I personally think this team has dynasty potential. When you look at their top players on offense, and Joe Burrow, who's 25, Jamar Chase, who is 21, almost 22, T. Higgins is 23, and Joe Mixon is 25, almost 26. That core 4 players right there, that's really all you need. That's all they needed this year. They obviously had production from other players, but when you can have your quarterback, your top 2 receivers, and your running back all be blooming into stars in the league, that doesn't bode well for the rest of their division and the league as a whole. So I think this team could really be scary in the future if they're able to keep these guys around. But I would really like to see where this team goes, because if they can beat Kansas City next weekend and make it to the Super Bowl and even win, that's really going to change the landscape of the league. Because if they can go out in free agency and even the draft and get big-time players to come in and help that team, they're going to be a lot scarier than they are now. The second game this weekend saw the San Francisco 49ers also travel to meet the number 1 seed Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. This game, the Green Bay Packers were heavily favored to win, but unfortunately they did end up losing 13-10 after San Francisco kicker Robbie Gould hit a game-winning field goal as time expired. It was honestly a pretty disappointing game for the 49ers offense, in my opinion. Jimmy Garoppolo was 11 for 19 for 131 yards and an interception. On the ground, running back Eli Mitchell had 17 carries for 53 yards, and wide receiver Deebo Samuel also had 10 carries for 39 yards. For a player that had been so productive all year, it was kind of surprising to see Green Bay shut him down as much as they did with as many touches as he actually got throughout the game. Their leading receiver was George Kittle, who had 4 catches for 63 yards, and then Deebo Samuel had 3 catches for 44 yards. On the Green Bay side of the ball, quarterback Aaron Rodgers threw 29 passes and completed 20 of them for 225 yards and 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. On the ground, running back Aaron Jones carried the ball 12 times for 41 yards, and A.J. Dillon had 7 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown before leaving the game with a rib injury. Through the air, there was really only 2 players that contributed at all. Running back Aaron Jones had 9 catches for 129 yards, and Davante Adams continued his dominance when he plays the 49ers with 9 catches and 90 yards. A couple notes for the game. The 49ers really struggled in that first half, specifically Jimmy Garoppolo. In the first quarter, they had -7 yards as a whole, and in the first half, Jimmy Garoppolo was 3 for 9 for 43 yards and an interception. So it didn't look good for them, but then they did end up winning. They also blocked a first half Green Bay field goal, which would have increased Green Bay's lead. And then in the second half, they blocked a punt for a touchdown, which was the turning point in this game because Green Bay couldn't get anything done on offense. So then a special teams error that could have been easily prevented, but Green Bay is the number 32 ranked special teams in the league, so they're going to have blunders. You're going to expect blunders from them. It just sucked to see a season end due to a special teams error that could have easily been prevented. The 49ers are dealing with a lot of injuries, it seems. A couple guys were getting banged up in this game. It was seen Trent Williams was limping off the field. George Kittle was limping off the field. Deebo Samuel took a massive hit from linebacker Chris Barnes, and I believe he also was limping off the field later in the game. I don't think any of them are serious injuries, but they're still something to look at going into championship weekend. And then on the Packers side of the ball, in what could be his last game in a Green Bay uniform, in his first play of the game, Zadarius Smith got a sack. So it was very fitting to see a guy who loves Green Bay, but the fans also love him, come out in what could be his last game there and get a sack in a crucial playoff game. And it was a really promising performance from Rashawn Gary. Coming out of the draft, I wasn't too sure about him, and then he had a shaky rookie year, but in the divisional round game, he had 4 tackles and 2 sacks, which it was a banged up right side of the line for the 49ers, but it was still nice to see a young guy get playoff experience, get playoff sacks, and hopefully that'll help him mature and improve as a player going into next season. Darnell Savage and A.J. Dillon both got hurt during this game. I believe it was a chest injury for A.J. Dillon, and I think it was either a chest or an ankle injury for Darnell Savage. So hopefully those guys can heal up, come back better next year for however Green Bay is going to look. A healthy Green Bay team next year could be scary, but it could also be a little shaky depending on what that roster as a whole is looking like. Aaron Rodgers has now also fallen to 0-4 against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs, which is the most losses against one team in the playoffs all time, I believe. But this could be the last game in the Green Bay uniform for a lot of players like Davante Adams, Zadarius Smith. So it was nice to see those guys come out. Nice to see them perform, put on a show at home in front of those Lambeau fans. But I think the star of the show last weekend for Green Bay was Aaron Jones. Those 9 catches for 129 yards and then 12 carries for 41 yards. Obviously, it didn't affect the win. They still ended up losing despite the game he had, it is what it is. You're not going to win every time one of your players has a great game. You'd like to see it come out with a win, but it happens. But now San Francisco will move on to the NFC Championship, where they will go to LA to play the Los Angeles Rams. Speaking of the Los Angeles Rams, they competed in the first game on Sunday, where they traveled to Tampa Bay to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they ended up coming out with a 30-27 win after Matt Gay kicked a game-winning field goal as time expired. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford threw 28 for 38 for 366 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford went 28 for 38 for 366 yards and 2 touchdowns in his second ever playoff win. Running back Cam Akers ran the ball 24 times for 48 yards, which was impressive. I still can't believe he's playing 6 months after tearing his Achilles. When that recovery takes, I believe, 11 months, 12 months, it's just kind of crazy to see him out there producing and playing in a playoff game 6 months after an injury of that sort. Through the air, wide receiver Cooper Kupp had 9 catches for 183 yards and a touchdown, while Odell Beckham Jr. hauled in 6 balls for 69 yards. The Rams defense was giving Tampa Bay problems all day long as they got to Brady multiple times and pressured him into making mistakes that he wouldn't make had his offensive line held up. On the Tampa Bay side of the ball, Tom Brady threw 30 for 54 for 329 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. On the ground, running back Leonard Fournette carried the ball 13 times for 51 yards and 2 touchdowns. Through the air, wide receiver Mike Evans caught the ball 8 times for 119 yards and a touchdown, and veteran tight end Rob Gronkowski caught the ball 4 times for 85 yards, while running back Leonard Fournette also had 9 receptions for 56 yards. A very impressive game for Leonard Fournette. Couple notes, 3rd and 20 in the first half, there was a 70-yard touchdown pass to Cooper Kupp, which was not the only big pass that he hauled in during the day. He had a crazy game. After a crazy regular season, it was only fitting that he comes out and shows out in a playoff game of this magnitude. Von Miller had a strip sack on Tom Brady, which stalled the Bucs' momentum. But then on the very next offensive play, LA fumbled and Tampa recovered it. It was a nasty game for fumbles. LA fumbled the ball 5 times and lost 4 of them, but they still ended up winning somehow despite losing the turnover battle. It was a Matthew Stafford game-winning drive that actually kept the Rams in this game. The Buccaneers had came back to tie the game with, I believe, 42 seconds left, and then Matthew Stafford got the ball, completed 2 massive passes to Cooper Kupp, clocked it, they kicked the game-winning field goal, and are now moving on to the NFC Championship. The only problem is they're playing the San Francisco 49ers, and since 2019, the Rams are 0-6 against the 49ers. But for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they had no Tristan Wirfs, which I think was huge. He's one of the best linemen in the league, but also one of the best right tackles in the league, and he's only in his 2nd year. And not having him for a game like this was massive because the Rams have such a good pass rush. Having backups in the game really jeopardizes your chance to get anything going. They still ended up putting up 27 points, which is still really good. I believe this game would have went in Tampa's favor if Tristan Wirfs was playing, because that's just an extra protector that Brady trusts, and it's an extra protector for that offensive line. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did get in their own way a lot during this game. Lots of big penalties. There was an unsportsmanlike conduct on Levante David. Ndamukong Suh had a taunting penalty called. Tom Brady had an unsportsmanlike conduct called on him, and the kicker also kicked the ball out of bounds twice on kickoffs, which immediately started the Rams at the 40-yard line. Those were mistakes that could have easily been prevented, but I believe those are very crucial to the Rams winning that game because Tampa kept shooting themselves in the foot. They kept getting in their own way, and they just made it easier for the Rams to end up winning. I also have Fournette or bust. He is the only running back in the game for Tampa that actually carried the ball, and he also had over 100 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. I believe he's a free agent this offseason, so I think they do need to sign him back. The Bucs will have a lot of free agency decisions to make this offseason, as wide receiver Chris Godwin, who tore his ACL, I believe, earlier in the year, is also a free agent. So whether they bring him back, I'm not sure. There's just a lot of question marks for Tampa Bay because this offseason is going to be really big for them, because also before the game there was talk coming out that this could have been Brady's last game as a Buck and in the NFL in general. So it'll be interesting to see how, as the offseason progresses, what's actually going to happen with Tom Brady. And this was Tom Brady's first playoff loss in Tampa Bay, which is crazy. He's obviously only been there 2 years, but last year they ran the gauntlet and won the Super Bowl, and then they won last week and then ended up losing this past weekend. Our final game of the divisional round weekend took place at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, as the Buffalo Bills traveled to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. This was a game that I don't think either team really deserved to lose, but you have to have a winner, especially in these playoff games. Can't end in a tie. But the Kansas City Chiefs ended up winning this game in overtime, 42-36. For the Bills, Josh Allen threw 27 for 37 for 329 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also ran the ball 11 times for 68 yards. Through the air, it was a surprising leading receiver as second-year receiver Gabriel Davis caught the ball 8 times for 201 yards and 4 touchdowns. In what was supposed to be his revenge game, so to say, wide receiver Stephon Diggs was very quiet and only had 3 catches for 7 yards. But on the Chiefs side of the ball, quarterback Patrick Mahomes was amazing as usual. 33 for 44 for 378 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran the ball 7 times for 69 yards and a touchdown, while running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran the ball 7 times for 60 yards. Through the air, it was the usual suspects for the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill had 11 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown, and Travis Kelce had 8 receptions for 96 yards and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Like I said, it was a game I didn't think either team really deserved to lose. Those final 2 minutes of the game were absolutely crazy. It was touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and then the Bills really did nothing wrong. They gave the Chiefs the ball back with 13 seconds left on the clock. You don't really expect a team to go and score a game-tying field goal with that much time left, but you can never really count the Chiefs out, and you can really see that now. But Josh Allen, I think, is becoming elite. I think he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. He's still young, he's still improving, he's still maturing, but when he's coming out and he's putting up games like this against good teams, it really shows how far he's come since his rookie year, and I think he's only going to get better. And I think this Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, not really rivalry, but I think these two are going to become the next Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, as they're going to be probably the top 2 quarterbacks in the conference every year, and they're normally going to meet each other in the playoffs, and one of them always has to come out on top. For the Chiefs, it was really bad that Tyrann Mathieu got hurt on their very first defensive drive of the game. Jerron Reed ended up hitting him in the back of the head, incidentally, and Tyrann Mathieu left the game with a concussion, which I don't think it'll be super serious. I'm pretty sure he'll play in the AFC Championship, but it's still something to keep an eye on. But Tyreek Hill was arguably the unsung hero of this game. Obviously, he had 11 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown. Had a great game, but a lot of that came on a 64-yard touchdown with 1 minute and 2 seconds left that ended up giving the ball back to Buffalo, where they would go and score a touchdown to leave 13 seconds left for the Chiefs to come back and tie it. I still can't believe it happened. It's not very often that a team can go and score that many times in that little of time, but I wouldn't expect anything less out of the Chiefs and the Bills. I think this game is always guaranteed to be good. They're just 2 good overall teams, 2 great young quarterbacks, and I can't wait to see how these 2 improve, and I want to see how they play each other in the future. Because like I said, I think this is going to be the next great quarterback rivalry, because they're both so young and they're both so good. Obviously, Mahomes has the better resume right now with the Super Bowl MVP, and the regular season MVP. I think Josh Allen's going to get his eventually. I don't know when it'll be, especially with Patrick Mahomes being so good. But I'm looking forward to these next couple years, even the next decade, however long these two stay in the conference and in the league. Because unfortunately, injuries do happen. But I would hate to see either of these guys have to retire or leave the league early due to injury. But overall, it was a very good divisional round weekend. 3 game-winning field goals and then a game-winning touchdown in overtime. It's not very often that you get 4, not necessarily good games, because I don't think that San Francisco-Green Bay game was great just because of the low scoring. But it's not very often you see this many good games in one weekend. But when you get to the playoffs, you have the best teams there. You're going to get the best games. So I can't wait for the NFC and AFC Championship this coming weekend. Now it is time for me to make my predictions for the NFC and AFC Championship games this coming Sunday. The AFC Championship is the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And then the NFC Championship is the San Francisco 49ers traveling to play the Los Angeles Rams. So starting with the AFC Championship, as much as I would like to see the underdog Bengals win and go to the Super Bowl, I think it's really hard to count out Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, especially when it's in these big games. You can never really count them out because they have been so good in the playoffs. I want the Bengals to win, but I think the Chiefs are going to end up leaving Arrowhead with the W. The last time these two teams played, Cincinnati did win by a field goal, but I think it's going to be a much different story in the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs have been there. They know what it takes to win it. So I just don't believe that the Bengals will be able to get it done, but I will not be disappointed if they do. And then on the NFC side, like I said, it's the 49ers traveling to play the Rams. Earlier I stated that the Rams are 0-6 since 2019 against the 49ers, and I do think that changes on Sunday. I believe that the Rams defense, if they can contain the 49ers run game and make Jimmy Garoppolo throw the ball to beat them, I don't think San Francisco will be able to win that game. I know that San Francisco has a pretty decent offensive line, but I think that Rams pass rush is just too much for them to handle. Jalen Ramsey is obviously going to do his thing on the outside, and then Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, they're just going to ruin a quarterback's day coming through that line. But I think it'll be a close game, but I see the Rams coming out on top, and I think Matthew Stafford's finally going to get to a Super Bowl, which was never going to happen while he was in Detroit. So my predictions for this weekend are the San Francisco 49ers losing to the Los Angeles Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. So it will be Kansas City Chiefs against the Los Angeles Rams on February 13th at Rams Stadium, SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, California. As always, I'm your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that Hall of Fame defensive end Reggie White ended his career with 198 sacks, which is second all time. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.